Welcome to Agriculture in Review, a news program of current interest to South Dakota farmers and ranchers, prepared by the South Dakota Farmers Union. This is Allan Burke. The 1974 state legislature has ground to a close after a session marked by an unusually large number of bills, lots of controversy, and long working hours for the legislators. As the lawmakers packed their bags and headed home to begin pondering the upcoming general election, where their voting records will be debated, surely a sigh of relief must have echoed across the state. Some of the legislators are frustrated because the biggest job, and the most important, was not accomplished. And of course, that's tax reform. Even though these lawmakers have had 2 sessions to pass tax legislation, nothing significant has changed the antiquated South Dakota tax system, which relies so heavily on the property tax. The tax debate has been around for at least 20 years, and legislators can rest assured that the problem will not go away. Taxes are one of the most basic things that concern people, whether they live in town or out in the country. Property taxes are outrageously high in most areas, schools are very poorly funded, and low-income people and those on fixed incomes are suffering because of our tax system. The real test of the strength of the people who advocate the establishment of a state income tax and reduction of the property tax will come next November. And at this point at least, it appears that the legislators who have stubbornly opposed any type of tax reform may find themselves without a job come Election Day. But that will depend upon the concern and the dedication of the voters. Well, it's easy to criticize the legislature, and it should be pointed out that virtually every state lawmaker worked long hours this year. It was not unusual for a legislator to be on 2 committees meeting at the same time as the flood of bills swept through the session. Many times the committees would meet after the day's session, which means the legislators went to the meeting rooms to go back to work at 11 o'clock at night or even later. This legislature did accomplish some highly significant landmarks that will be remembered for a long, long time, and they certainly should have credit for that. First, the Family Farm Act, which would help protect family farms and ranches from the encroachment of non-farm corporations and foreign investors, is now on the governor's desk. The Farmers Union is noted for its years of diligent work to get this type of legislation passed. South Dakota is now one of 4 states with a meaningful Family Farm Act on the books. The other states are North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Minnesota. Another landmark is the Uniform Probate Code, which makes sweeping changes in the way estates are now settled. Hopefully, now the probate process will be less costly and, for goodness sake, speedier. The Governor's Railroad Task Force has been funded by the legislature. This group will now vigorously study the various avenues of saving our rail system and improving it. Consumers, both rural and urban, were spared the inflationary problem of higher interest rates on revolving charge accounts during this session. Large chain stores with out-of-state headquarters actively lobbied for an 18% interest rate. They utilized highly paid Denver lawyers and an impressive Texas lobbyist in their effort, but the 80% increase was held to only 20%. Other actions by the 1974 legislature include the funding of an animal science facility at State University in Brookings, and a few minor sales tax changes were passed that would benefit senior citizens and also farmers who buy machinery attachments. Healthcare cooperatives may now be started in South Dakota because this legislature was far-sighted enough to act. These health maintenance organizations would provide prepaid medical services to members. One controversial issue that will be back again is the argument over land use legislation. Conservative groups complaining that somehow better erosion control would bring government takeover of independent farms managed to kill the legislation. The same groups oppose the Family Farm Act, which is intended to protect independent farmers. But all in all, it was a more productive session in terms of agriculture than many in the past. Now, the important thing is for voters to study the voting records of the legislators to determine who should come back in 1995. The legislators, well, they'll be resting up for a few days, and they certainly all deserve some rest. With that, we'll close another edition of Agriculture in Review. This is Allan Burke asking you to join us again next week for another review of rural America's highlights. This program was produced by the South Dakota Farmers Union.